Okay, picture this. It's your very first Christmas as a married couple. Pretty special, right? Now imagine it's 1942. The entire world is at war. This is the story of how one young couple on the American home front managed to find a little bit of hope and connection right in the middle of all that chaos. And it all started with some really simple holiday traditions.
This quote right here from Fred Seaver, who's one of the people at the heart of our story, well, it just perfectly captures what we're talking about today. It's this idea that when everything around you feels like it's completely falling apart, it's those small, everyday things, those little traditions that really anchor you. They're what keep us human.
So let's meet Betty and Fred Seaver. We're in Southern California. It's December of 1942. They've only been married for about 5 months, and as they get ready for their very first Christmas together, you can just feel the shadow of the war looming over absolutely everything.
So you have to ask, in a time with so much uncertainty, how do you even begin to hold on to some sense of normalcy or connection? Well, for the Seavers, and really for millions of other people at the time, it all started with a simple but incredibly powerful ritual: sending out Christmas cards.
60 cards. Think about that for a second. This is long before email, before social media, before any of that. 60 was a huge number. It meant taking a ton of time and effort to keep their personal network strong, one handwritten note at a time. And their network was just huge. It spanned the whole country. You had Fred's family, way over in Massachusetts, 3,000 miles away. Then there was Betty's family, right there in California. And then this whole web of college friends, coworkers, neighbors. Each card was like a little thread, just holding their world together. And what Betty realized here is so important. She saw that what they were doing, this very personal thing, was actually part of something so much bigger. It was a nationwide ritual. Millions of people, all quietly fighting back against the fear and isolation of the war with just a piece of paper and a message from the heart.
Of course, it wasn't just about the cards. If they wanted to create that real Christmas feeling, they had to build new traditions of their own. But, this was not easy. There was wartime rationing, shortages of everything. They really had to find their joy in making do with whatever they could get their hands on.
And their first Christmas tree? It was a perfect example of their resourcefulness. It was a small 5-foot tree, that's all they could afford. The stand was literally a bucket filled with rocks. And the decorations were just simple glass balls they got from the local 5-and-dime store.
But Fred didn't see a crooked, sparse tree. He saw their first tree, a symbol of the new life they were building. The beauty wasn't in some kind of perfect shape. It was in what it stood for: a home, a marriage, and a future, even if it was standing on a slightly wobbly foundation.
Family was, of course, right at the center of their Christmas. But for Betty and Fred, family really meant two totally different kinds of connection. One stretched all the way across the continent, and the other was just a few miles down the road.
You can really feel the two different worlds they were living in. On one hand, you've got Fred's family back in Massachusetts. Their love had to travel thousands of miles in letters and packages. And on the other hand, there was Betty's family, the Carringers, offering that immediate warmth of a shared meal and just being there in person. And they needed both, desperately. And this search for hope, it went beyond just their little apartment. At their Christmas Eve church service, the priest gave this really powerful sermon. He reminded everyone that the very first Christmas, well, it also happened during a time of war and military occupation. It was this timeless message that hope can and does show up even in the darkest of times.
And that feeling of hope carried them right into Christmas morning. This is when all those different threads, the rituals, the connections, all came together in the form of some simple, modest gifts and one really significant and, very expensive phone call. The gifts they gave each other weren't fancy, but they were so personal, so thoughtful. A new wallet for Fred because his old one was literally falling apart. And for Betty, this little mirror she had pointed out months before and probably forgotten all about. It just shows how closely they were paying attention to each other.
And then came the main event, the big package from Fred's family in Massachusetts. This was a real team effort. A hand-knitted sweater from his mom, Bessie. Homemade preserves from his sister. A framed family picture. Every single thing in that box was personal or handmade or just carefully chosen to send a little piece of home all the way to California.
And tucked inside was a letter from Fred's mother. This line, written to her new daughter-in-law, just closes that 3,000-mile gap in an instant. It makes Betty a real part of the Seaver family. It's so much more than a gift, right? It's this deep, profound welcome.
So after all the gifts were opened, they did something that was a serious luxury in 1942. They made a long-distance phone call. It's hard for us to imagine now, but you couldn't just dial a number. You had to go through an operator, the connection was probably terrible, and it cost a fortune. But for them, those 10 minutes of just hearing their family's voices, absolutely priceless.
The day wrapped up with Christmas dinner at Betty's parents' house. It was this moment of pure celebration and gratitude, but you know the anxiety about the war was never too far away. And the conversation around the dinner table really shows this delicate balance. I mean, they mostly talked about happy things, family stories, old memories, but the war and their uncertain hopes for what 1943 would bring was always there, kind of an unspoken guest at the table.
And this bit of wisdom from Betty's mom, Emily, really just perfectly captures the spirit of the home front. It's a whole philosophy of resilience. You know the fear's there, you acknowledge it, but you just refuse to let it paralyze you. You focus on right now, on the good you have right in front of your face.
So, what's the big takeaway from Betty and Fred's wartime Christmas? It's a really powerful reminder, I think, that when the world feels totally chaotic and the future is a giant question mark, our strength doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from the small, personal rituals of connection. Writing a card, decorating a crooked tree, sharing a meal, these are the things that keep us human. They're acts of hope.
And that leaves us with something to think about. I mean, 1942 might feel like a lifetime ago, but the human need for hope when things are uncertain, that's timeless. So it's worth asking ourselves, in our own lives, today, what are the small rituals, the simple traditions that give us strength and keep us connected when we need it the most?